Good morning and welcome to Silklife Live here on Facebook. It's our privilege to have you dropping in on us this morning. This morning we're going to be looking at the topic of the resurrection of Jesus. We're picking up from our Easter Sunday talks where we started to think about the joy that was before Jesus that meant he was able to go through such a brutal treatment. I want to say to you this morning that I'm really aware that Christianity makes huge claims about the life and the death of Jesus Christ. To be honest, even when we call him Christ, whether you're blaspheming or not, we're making a huge claim because that word actually means something. We're calling him the Messiah. Or more literally, God's anointed one. Anointed one. Not one of many. Anointed means chosen. And when we call Jesus the Christ, we're saying he is the chosen one, the chosen route for salvation, the chosen route for us to find access to our Heavenly Father and Divine Creator. The chosen route by which we have hope that there is a life after all of this, a hope that's beyond the grave. This is a huge claim. Easter Sunday itself is a celebration of what we call the resurrection. Jesus coming alive on the Sunday, having died on the Friday. As far as claims go, it doesn't get much bigger than that. Of course, when reports began to emerge that Jesus' body was missing from the tomb, not everyone jumped to believe that he was resurrected. Not everybody was chuffed by the news. Those responsible for his death were certainly keen to squash any rumours at all of a resurrected Jesus. You remember that Pilate had given the Pharisees permission to guard the tomb with Roman soldiers. Matthew's Gospel describes it as this: while the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priest everything that had happened. So this is the Sunday morning. The women have visited the tomb. They found the tomb empty, and the guards are now going with their tail between their legs to try and explain to the chief priest what on earth has happened. And when the chief priests had met with the elders and devised a plan, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money, telling them, you are to say, his disciples came during the night and stole him away while we were asleep. And if this report gets back to the governor, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble. So the soldiers took the money and did as they were instructed. And this story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day. Think about that. The Pharisees paid the soldiers money to claim that the disciples had stolen Jesus' body. I wonder what this did for their soldiering career. These are supposed to be hard as nail soldiers, mean, lean, killing machines. These guys don't go to sleep on the job, and they pay for it if they do. The disciples, on the other hand, they're a ragtag bunch of fishermen, blue-collar workers and fragile women. Most of them ran away in fear when Jesus was arrested. Brash Peter, well, he refused to admit he even knew Jesus. But somehow, we're asked to believe that these cowering nobodies snuck around the guards while they were asleep, rolled back the stone without waking or alerting anyone, and snuck Jesus away in the dead of night. It's not that likely. More recently, people have said the Romans or Jews just simply hid the body as a cruel trick. But you have to remember that neither the Jews nor the Romans wanted the sect of Jesus' followers to gather any momentum at all. They were a troubling bunch of upstarts. Why give mileage to their story of a resurrected Jesus? Just simply bring the body out. Parade it through the streets, hang it from a pole, make sure everybody knows that Jesus is well and truly dead. Let people see the mould and the maggots. It's very difficult to worship a mouldy, maggoty corpse. Some said the disciples had gone to the wrong tomb, that Jesus' body is still snugly lying in the ground, and we're all sadly deluded. But everyone knew the tomb belonged to a guy called Joseph of Arimathea. They knew where that tomb was. And there was only one tomb with a huge bunch of guards stood outside it. If the body was still there, why not bring it out? Make the noisy, troublesome Christians go away. Nobody's ever found a Jesus tomb, and the legend has never gone away. Even better than that, and this is probably my favourite, some people have said that Jesus was never really dead. That while on the cross he simply swooned, fainted, passed out. That Jesus was still alive when they placed him in the ground, and that somehow Jesus recovered and then escaped. It's a theory. Let's think it through. So Jesus had been brutally beaten and abused over many hours. He'd hung on a cross, fighting for breath under the weight of his own body, until eventually he passes out or dies, one of the two. The guards wanted to check he was dead, and so they drove a spear into his side, and Jesus managed to control any pain reaction to that to make them believe that he was dead. Believing he was dead, they pulled him down and placed him in a stone cave. These are soldiers. They know what death looks like. They know how to make sure that somebody dies. And even if Jesus was alive, even if, the likelihood that Jesus would lie alone in a cold, underground tomb with no food or drink, with horrific injuries, just lie there, unconscious, all night Friday, all day Saturday, and then at some point during Saturday night, he would stir, wake up, and calmly emerge from the tomb. That he would just roll back the stone with all of his injuries. That he would roll the stone back without the Roman guards noticing. That he would escape through the graveyard without being seen. That he might appear to the two Marys the next morning apparently in really good health. No scars, no deformities, no blood, none of that. Come off it. It's as unlikely and requires just as much faith as the resurrection itself. But I'm aware I've digressed. The Pharisees, they denied the resurrection of Jesus. But not everyone did. The Bible describes a group of ladies who loved Jesus dearly going to the tomb early on the Sunday morning to tend to his body. There they found the tomb empty and Jesus, apparently, in the garden. The Bible describes them as perplexed, confused, and afraid, which is completely appropriate. We often make the mistake of thinking that God will fit within our framework, fit within our understanding and our expectations. And sometimes we'll hear tales of answers to prayer, healing or dramatic breakthrough, and we have to fight back waves of skepticism. Sometimes there are passages of the Bible that don't fit with our understanding of the world because they're off our grid reference. This is a reality check. The Bible doesn't allow us the option of restricting God. There are too many bizarre, earth-shattering events to keep God in a box. Jesus broke too many rules during his life. The resurrection, it breaks all the rules. In fact, a sanitized Bible without those events is not good news at all. A God who is restricted to our ability or our understanding of the world, I don't think that's God at all. We didn't create the world. We didn't create the rules of science. We didn't peg out the parameters of space. We didn't position the planets and the stars. I don't really want to worship a God that looks like me because it's distinctly unimpressive. I want the excitement and the adventure of following a God who can do more than I can imagine, who can defy logic, who can bring hope even when there isn't any hope. Luke describes the moment Jesus appears with his disciples as they gathered together in Jerusalem. They were startled and frightened, believing they were seeing a ghost. Again, I want to say, this is perfectly rational. There is no rule book for when a loved one dies. Even more so, there's absolutely no rule book for when a loved one dies and then seemingly returns from the dead. Jesus asked them, and this is comedy question of the month, why are you troubled? Why do doubts arise in your hearts? Just think about the context of this. These disciples, they're gathered together in a hidden room somewhere in the city. Their leader has been crucified. They've run in fear of their lives. They've heard reports of people seeing Jesus, and they're likely just dismissing it as hallucinations or wishful thinking. And then, seemingly without coming through the door, Jesus appears among them, and they start to react strangely. And he asks them this brilliant question: why are you troubled? And why do doubts arise in your hearts? I got a lot of sympathy with these guys. I can completely see why they might be troubled. And I can completely see why they might have doubts about what they're seeing. Again, get that. But equally, these are men and women who spent the last 3 years with Jesus. Think about what they'd seen. It's not like they hadn't seen him do some crazy, crazy stuff. Healing people, apparently bringing Lazarus and Jairus' daughter back to life. It's not like he hadn't warned them what was going to happen. They hadn't understood it, but he had warned them. When Jesus had spoken to them about being their good shepherd, he said, quite literally, I lay my life down, only to take it up again. No one takes my life from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. When he'd spoken to them about the temple, he said, destroy this temple and I will raise it up again in 3 days. Jesus had predicted his own suffering by saying the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and by the chief priests and by the scribes and be killed. And after 3 days, rise again. But Jesus is not threatened or angered by their questions. In fact, I think the opposite. In the passage, he invites the disciples to examine him. He stands in front of them and says, see my hands and my feet. Check that it is me. Touch me and see me. For a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see that I have. Think about what he's saying. Come close and examine me. Check, touch, feel. Look at the scars from my wounds. See that I am solid, not just an apparition. Satisfy yourself that this is not a figment of your imagination, a convoluted lie, that this really is happening in front of you. I want to say to you today that God can handle your questions. He's not threatened or angered by them. In fact, Jesus invites you to examine him, to check that it is him, to touch and see. Ask the big questions of life and see if he's found wanting. One warning. Don't just dismiss the huge claims about Jesus because they're huge. Wait until you've truly examined them. There is one person I'd like us to look at before we finish. And this is our good friend, dear old Peter. Loudmouth, impulsive, bolshy, dear old Peter. Mr. I'll never leave you, Peter. In fact, sad, tragic Peter, who of course did deny Jesus, just as Jesus had predicted. Peter who ran off with his tail between his legs, humiliated, heartbroken and alone. He goes fishing. What do men do when they're struggling and they're nursing their wounds? They go back to what they'd already known. Gone fishing. And the Bible tells us that they'd fished all night, but caught nothing. As the sun begins to rise, they raise anchor and head for shore, empty-handed. It is insult to injury. Peter is tired from a night's work. Cuts and calluses on his hands from hauling ropes and nets. An aching heart from bereavement and loss. They had so many dreams. Their whole lives were tied up with Jesus and what might have been. The sun casts long shadows on the beach, and one man stands alone on the shore. And the voice comes, carried by the wind across the waters. Children, do you have any fish? I can only imagine the irritation in the voices of these working class tradesmen. The Bible describes it as saying no, but I imagine there may have been some fruity language. Do one, pal. We've been busy all night and we don't need you putting the finger on our inadequacy or failure. And then the voice carries on across the water. It says, cast the net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. Again, I wonder about what might have been muttered under their breath at this voice that had carried from the shore. But nonetheless, they cast out one more time. They throw their nets in the water. Maybe they don't even throw them properly. Maybe they just dangle them over the edge just to humour the guy. Just as they'd done many times through the night, they throw the net out. Only now, they're not able to haul it back in because the net is so full. 153 fish. Big fish, little fish, medium fish, crammed in, one on top of the other. John turns to Peter and there's this look of acknowledgement. We've been here before, pal. And you know who that is. It's the Lord. Peter's there on the boat, stripped off to his race, ready for work. So he grabs his jacket and he literally flings himself without thinking into the water. Half swimming, half running, gasping from the chill of the sea. He must have looked a total state as he stumbles up the beach, running like a small boy to Jesus. There must have been this moment when their eyes met. A moment of knowing everything that had gone on, everything that had gone wrong, the choices that Peter had made, the unfulfilled promises he'd made. I don't know, maybe Peter even looked away, flushed with embarrassment and shame. But Jesus doesn't focus on these mistakes, or the past, or the promises that were broken. He says a very, very simple sentence. Come and have breakfast with me. There were conversations that followed, but in this moment, Jesus issues the simplest of invitations. Let's eat, brother. Let's do the normal things of life, but together. Let's start again. Let's do the journey over. Wiser and better maybe, but together. Peter, let me meet your most ingrained human needs, because I'm the bread of life. This is our invitation today. God is not asking us to justify ourselves. to explain our mistakes, to grovel in apologies, because his grace is sufficient. It is enough. He is enough. He's not asking us to have all the answers to all the questions, because that is his job. He's not asking us to have it all together. Fear, doubts, confusion, they are all real human emotions that we can bring to him. They're warning lights on the dashboard of what's going on inside of us, and we must take notice of them. But the invitation is this: come eat with me. Come taste and see that I am good. Come taste and see that I'm God. Let's pray together before we finish. Father, thank you. Thank you for the freedom to approach you and know you. A freedom that comes through your chosen, anointed one, Jesus Christ. God, I pray for my friends listening in today. I pray that you meet them wherever they are, whatever state they're in, whatever question or emotions floods through their hearts and minds, would you meet them? Let nothing be a barrier between you and them. Lord, by tuning in today, we've taken a step towards you, maybe a big one, maybe a small one. But Lord, I pray that you would cross the remaining distance, no matter how small or large, and encounter each one of us in a remarkable fashion. Fill us with your presence and love. Fill us to overflowing. Fill us with your grace and mercy. Fill us with your confidence in Christ that defies logic and surpasses understanding. Lord, I pray for those who are struggling today. Struggling with health, struggling with their emotional or their mental health, struggling with the circumstances or struggling with their emotions or thought life. Lord, I pray, let your goodness flow through them and to them. Streams of living water, bringing hope, life, and restoration. Lord, all this that we might know you more, we might honour you and delight in you, for the glory of your name. Amen. Thanks for joining us today, folks, and we look forward to catching up again next Sunday, same time.